Good morning, students. Today we will take up most common upper abdominal symptoms of gastrointestinal origin, dyspepsia, for discussion. We will take 10 to 15 minutes to discuss these symptoms. You see, the clinical word dyspepsia means dys and paps, difficult digestion. The definition arises in 1980, epigastric and retrointestinal symptoms of gastrointestinal origin for more than 4 weeks, and it can be ulcer, dysmotility, reflux, and unspecified. In 1999, in Rome II separated GERD from dyspepsia as a distinct entity, and in 2006, Rome criteria, postprandial distress syndrome and epigastric pain syndromes were characterized as two distinct clinical identities, and in 2016 Rome IV have added bothersome symptoms overlapping with postprandial distress syndrome and epigastric pain syndrome, overlapping with GERD and IBS. Bloating, belching can coexist, and vomiting is entirely a different entity and has been separated. Now, prevalence of dyspepsia is 10 to 45% in different general population. 1/4 do not contact clinician for treatment regarding chronic or recurrent symptoms. They go on treating themselves. 25% have organic dyspepsia, have underlying organic disease of GI origin, gastritis, duodenitis, esophagitis, or non-GI origin dyspepsia like biliary dyspepsia, pancreatic diseases, and because of the intestinal diseases, dyspeptic symptoms can occur. 75% have functional dyspepsia where there is no underlying evident organic disease as seen on ultrasound endoscopy. Now, coexist with dyspepsia, gastroparesis is a definite clinical entity, non-erosive reflux disease is another entity, and IBS is another distinct clinical entity. Now, functional dyspepsia, the basic defect is delayed gastric emptying, and the same has been seen in diabetic patient, hypothyroid patient, fatty foods, some drugs like anticholinergic drugs, and in medical disorders. Impaired gastric accommodation is seen in 15% of the patients, like in diabetes, post-operative patient, post-gastric surgery patient, and in some medical disorders. Now, gastric and duodenal hypersensitivity of mechanoreceptors for distension of these two areas can cause dyspeptic symptoms, so as H. pylori. Now, CNS dysfunction has also been observed in these dyspeptic patients. There is a release of CRF from hypothalamus, neuromedia levels from medulla, anorexia, decreased food intake, impaired gastric accommodation, and delayed gastric emptying can coexist in these patients in genetically predisposed patients for dyspepsia. Now, PDS is a postprandial epigastric fullness or distension with early satiety, while epigastric pain or burning, not of chest origin or other intra-abdominal origin, is EPS. Bloating, belching, aerophagia, heartburn, regurgitation, all can coexist. Alteration in bowel habits, pain, relieved with defecation has separated IBS as a distinct entity. Vomiting, look for other causes and look for stress and organic disease in such patients. Now, when we evaluate patient of dyspepsia, we go for a routine hemogram, biochemistry and imaging, and routine imaging includes ultrasound nowadays, gastroscopy, other tests for diagnosis of organic disease, pH monitoring, manometry and scintigraphy in advanced centers, and breath test, capsule endoscopy, SPECT and MRI wherever they are available can be taken up for evaluation of these patients in some identified cases. Now, functional dyspepsia management includes use of anti-secretory drugs, use of pro-motility agents like prokinetic drugs, H. pylori eradication, antidepressant and anxiolytic use of analgesics and antispasmodic, lifestyle modification, complement and alternative medicine therapy, look for fungal infection, eosinophilic gastritis or enteritis, and look for systemic and organic disease in such patients. Now, we give H2 blocker to these patients because they are cheap. Those who can afford PPI are the drug of choice, as anti-secretory drugs, where dose of 20 to 60 milligram, 80 milligram to 80 milligram people can give in these patients, and time of taking PPI is 15 to 20 minutes before the first meal of the day, or if second dose is required, can be given 15 to 20 minutes before the last meal of the day. Now, duration of PPI in these dyspeptic patients are depending on as long as patients are symptomatic, number one. But if you have identified underlying cause like gastric ulcer and duodenal ulcer, we give duodenal ulcer treatment for 6 to 8 weeks. In gastric ulcer, we give it for 12 weeks, and so on. If there is identified underlying disease, then the duration is specified. Otherwise, give treatment for these patients as long as they are symptomatic, and they may require maintenance dose in some cases where a maintenance dose of 20 to 40 milligram OD is sufficient. Now, safety profile of PPI is safe for long-term use. There is no doubt about it. We are using for last 40 years without any significant side effect. Choice of selection is all PPI are same, but give the drugs which suits to the patient. If somebody is doing well with pantoprazole, give him pantoprazole. If somebody is doing well with omeprazole, give him omeprazole. Some doing better with esomeprazole, give him esomeprazole. So all PPI are same, and the drug of choice is which suits to the patient. And the mechanism of action of PPI, we know that it blocks, it is proton pump inhibitor. Next, prokinetic drugs have various actions and various mechanisms. Now, D2 antagonist is the most common mechanism of action. Cholinergic agonist they are, serotonin agonist they are, and motility agonist, enterochromaffin cells of duodenal release like motiline, and they are the various mechanisms of these drugs. Now, we have list of drugs in our basket like metoclopramide, domperidone, levosulfuride, mozapride, etopride, ecoshamide, cisapride, tegaserol, prucalopride, and motiline agonist as erythromycin. Now, metoclopramide has a lingering concern of extrapyramidal syndrome, so for long-term use, it is not suitable drug. It is the only drug which is used for parenteral infusion. Otherwise, other prokinetics are not there for parenteral use. But domperidone is safest. Levosulfuride can be given, mozapride can be given. These, the levosulfuride, mozapride, etopride, ecoshamide, and cisapride, they are the drugs which are acting on lower GI too. Cisapride has been withdrawn because of the prolongation of QT interval and lingering concern of arrhythmia in these patients. So there have been prucalopride has act on more, it is a more cholinergic drugs. Now, safety profile, CNS safety, because some of them can cause sedation and headache, and EPS can be caused by metoclopramide, I have already told you. Now, cardiac safety, prolongation of QT intervals, arrhythmia was there with cisapride, so it has, this drug was withdrawn. GI safety, all drugs can cause GI symptoms, we know, whether they are drugs for nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain and diarrhea, all can cause nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain and diarrhea. Galactorrhea and menstrual irregulation, because they are dopamine agonists. Few drugs are dopamine agonists, and drug hypersensitivity to these drugs can occur. Now, prokinetic action on upper GI, metoclopramide, domperidone, ecoshamide, all are acting on upper GI. And lower GI, mostly cisapride, mozapride, prucalopride do occur, and they are safe as well. Now, in treatment of dyspepsia, along with anti-secretory drugs, we eradicate H. pylori in many of them. If patient is not improving, then H. pylori eradication may help in relieving the symptoms in these patients. We use sometimes antidepressant, anxiolytic, and occasional SOS use of analgesics and antispasmodic drug. Of course, lifestyle modification, taking regular meals 2 or 3 times a day as suits the patient, along with complement and alternative medicine therapy, because many foods have nutritional value, many plants have their nutritional value, and many indigenous drugs have their medicinal value. So complement and alternative medicine therapy are often used by patients of dyspepsia on their own. Thank you.